Evan Engram to the Broncos, Rico Dowdle to the Panthers, and Joe Pisapia back to the show. One of our favorite guests, Joe Pisapia of Fantasy Pros. We've got a lot of rankings to talk about today. First question for you, Joe. Just put you right on the hot seat. Aaron Judge or Juan Soto? Who do we got?
Oh, well, you're asking the wrong guy. I want Juan Soto. Can't you see the Yankees are falling apart? Can't you hear all the Yankee fans just crying and just the tears? Oh, the tears. I feel like Eric Cartman at the end of the Scott Tetterman episode. I just want to lick the salty, sweet tears as Garrett Cole gets Tommy John and Juan Soto leaves the Yankees for the Mets. And Clay Holmes looks really good as a starter. I don't know how long it's going to last, but I'm just enjoying this moment, Azer. That's what I'm doing.
No, I forgot you were a Mets. I had a feeling you were a Mets fan. I thought you were a Mets fan, but I wasn't. Now I remember.
I think it's clear now. Yeah.
So the reason I asked Joe that is he double dips. He does baseball and football. This is a super busy time for him. And if you all the great baseball coverage and football coverage, got to plug Fantasy Pros, of course. CBS also very good. But you can tell us what you're doing because I know it's been a busy week for you, and then we'll get into football.
Well, we saw some of your colleagues yesterday on our Fantasy Fest on the Fantasy Pros MLB. Mr. Towers, Mr. Stanfield joining us, hanging out. Let a little tag team action there. But yeah, we are wall-to-wall fantasy baseball on the MLB channel on Fantasy Pros MLB, which is really kicking up a notch. We're on Twitch now too. We're doing a live shows on Twitch starting in season every single day. So we've got that happening. Of course, we've got our mock draft shows on the NFL channel also, which are super exciting. We'll have a new one drop post free agency with Debro, myself, and Fitz, trying to see now that the dust is settled, we have a much better idea of what the team needs are after free agency. And I think now we have a much clearer picture of maybe what the first round or maybe round or two might look like. And of course, if you're still looking to prepare fantasy baseball season, Fantasy Baseball Black Book right next to my beautiful bald head, still available on Amazon, updated March 1st. Go get that bad boy. It's great to see you guys. I missed you. It's nice after a couple months or so to get back into the football waters with the CBS boys.
Yeah, man. It's good to have you back. And I just want to introduce you to Dave, Richard, and Jamie Eisenberg, who are here as well. Dave, Jamie, hey, guys.
Hello.
Old friends. All right, fellas. So I got some trivia. Let's start off with a little trivia here. Mike Williams is back with the Chargers. What stat did Mike Williams lead all wide receivers in last season?
Irrelevancy.
Ooh, good one.
Anything else? He didn't lead just all wide receivers. He led all players. In fact, he probably set a record.
It's very difficult. How do you set records and things when you're not playing very much? That's the obstacle here, Dave, for me.
He was playing a lot. In fact, he set a record, or at least tied a record. Played 18 games last year.
Oh.
Yeah.
Wow, yes.
He got traded, I guess, and didn't have the bye week, and he played 18 games between the Jets and the Steelers. All right, so 0 for 1.
Routes run with doing nothing.
Yeah. Which
he led the NFL in cardio?
Minimum 50 targets. There were about 31 tight ends, I think. Which tight ends with a minimum of 50 targets ranked last and second to last in both yards per target and yards per catch in 2024?
Greg Dulcich and Adam Trautman.
No, it's Lucas Kroll if you're going to go Broncos tight ends.
I don't know if any of them.
I don't even know if that's where you're going with this.
I am sort of going there, but not those Broncos tight ends.
Oh, is it now Evan Engram? Is that the joke?
Evan Engram is one of them. So who the two least efficient tight ends in football last year?
There's always Easter eggs with Azer. You know, he throws out something out at the beginning of the show, and then later on it becomes a trivia thing. So Ingram's one of them. So it's got to be another big name, right? Is that what we're thinking?
It is another big name. Nobody I've mentioned, but another like top 8 PPR. 8. He's going to be like top 8 in ADP, at least top 10.
Kyle Pitts?
No, good guess. It's David Njoku. David Njoku and Evan Engram.
Good one.
Engram has been bottom 2 in yards per catch 2 straight seasons. All right, here we go. This number 3, Courtland Sutton. He had a game in week 7 with 0 catches on 0 targets at the Saints. From weeks 8 through 18, Courtland Sutton went off. How many times did he score single-digit PPR fantasy points from weeks 8 through 18?
0.
I'll say 1.
I'll go with 1 too.
Jamie wins.
Oh, wow. 1? That's
Pretty good. Number 10 wide receiver per game in the last 10 games of the season.
Week 14, he had 0.
He had a bye. Get out of here. All
Yeah,
right.
sure.
So,
Blame it
Adam,
on a bye.
I just think whenever we have guests on and you're giving away the secret formula why we won these awards, these great trivia questions. Joe's going to steal all these ideas.
All these horrible trivia questions. Okay, last trivia question. Between Chuba Hubbard and Rico Dowdle, who was better in yards per carry, yards before contact per carry, yards after contact per carry, avoid rate, and explosive run rate?
Why ask this question if it's not Rico Dowdle?
Right. Because this is what he does sometimes, Joe.
I know. And this is why you don't trust him.
You know where he's going, and then he makes a hard right turn, and guess what? It's Chuba.
That's not right. I'm in your head. I am in your head right now.
Yeah, I just won't answer.
Chuba.
Joe, you have an answer?
I'm sticking with Dowdle because it sounds ridiculous, and I don't think you're swerving me yet. But then again, it could also be my baseball brain just kind of working against me right now.
And I'll say tie.
It is. Sorry, I'm looking for this music for Jamie. Jamie wins! Yeah! All right, Jamie.
My theme song.
2%. Oh, did it fall again? Damn it! Oh, forget it. No background today. Oh, my background keeps falling.
Joe has like professional background behind himself. Like you have a piece of paper that falls every day.
It's 5
Well,
year
you
old.
see that one other thing behind him is a skew too. What is it? It's like a stadium picture.
Oh yeah, it's the orange.
And then there's a taped picture back there. Well, what's the budget you're working with here, Azer? What's happening here?
Pretty low. All right. So those are trivia.
It's all in sound effects, James.
We actually had planned $1 for every Mike Williams catch, and we gave him the extra game, and didn't work out to help his background.
I have an idea for a new background. All right, today's the day. Today's the day I'm going to go to Staples and I'm going to make this happen. New background next week. Speaking of next week,
Picture of me that's you owe?
Sort of. Our bracket challenge is going to begin next week. I don't have a URL just yet, but just stay tuned. I'm going to tweet it out. Obviously, we'll have a show on Monday, so you'll have time to join it. But if you win our bracket challenge, March Madness, you know how it works. You pick the games, you pick the winners. If you win it, you're in the podcast league. 1 point for the first round, 2, then 4, then 8, then 16, then 32 if you get the championship right. It sometimes does come down to the tiebreaker. But the winner of our bracket challenge, and I want like thousands of people in this, okay? Let's get a big audience here. The winner of our bracket challenge is in the podcast league. All right, Joe, I want to throw it to you for your biggest winners. We'll start with that, and then we'll get some of your biggest losers. But everything that's happened the last week or so, starting with Christian Kirk and Davante Adams and Geno Smith and all that, and continuing through Evan Engram, who are some of the big winners for you?
Well, look, I don't want to sound chalky here, but the big winner is definitely Davante Adams, and I think we're all the big winners too. And it's because not only does he go to a situation where he's got a very capable veteran quarterback who, one more really good playoff run or another Super Bowl appearance. I mean, maybe we start talking about Matthew Stafford in a different light. Maybe we need to give him a little bit more respect. I mean, all those years in his prime lost in Detroit. But what I like so much about the Adams situation is he's got Puka Nacua there already. And we all know Puka is, quote unquote, the guy. But he's also the guy that in his college career had injuries. In his pro career has had some injuries early on. And Davante Adams can peak as a number one if Puka Nacua misses time. The positive here is you're getting Davante Adams as that fringe wide receiver one investment. Right? He's going to be a wide receiver two-ish kind of guy, I think, in most people's rankings because Puka is going to be the target hog. And that's great because he's going to have a couple games where he goes off. That's absolutely going to happen, but you don't have to pay the cost for it. And you have all the upside in an offense is going to be very together, a capable quarterback, great head coach, that there's going to be a lot of upside if Puka goes down for any period of time where he steps into a number one role. So to me, it's all upside. So that's the guy who's at the very top of my list is Davante Adams. And, controlled environment in terms of weather, good situation there. I mean, there's a lot to like here at the age of Davante Adams. Going to the environment he's going to, I think, is just extremely positive for fantasy. And the best part is I don't think the cost really rises to a significant level where it makes him untenable as a draft pick.
Would you rather have Davante Adams or Courtland Sutton?
Really good comparison question there. I think after that trivia, things got a little dicey there. But I'm going to go Davante Adams because I'm going to put my eggs in the basket of the ecosystem of the Rams over the Broncos, despite the fact it was pretty good last year for the Denver Broncos, surprisingly so. I don't think I'm looking for any surprises. I know the Rams are going to be good in 2025.
Dave, how about you? Chuba Hubbard, sorry.
Don't take Chuba Hubbard, Dave. Don't listen to him.
Courtland Sutton or Davante Adams?
I'll take Adams over Sutton. I think they both qualify as mid to low end wide receiver twos. I fully agree with what Joe's saying. Completely trust the offense, trust the role that Adams has. I don't think he's going to get 10 targets a game. So we can downgrade him there, but that's why we're not taking him as like a top 15 wide receiver, more of a top 20 type of play in full PPR.
And Jamie?
I'm going to take the cost of what Sutton I think will be versus the cost of what Adams will be. So I think Adams gets drafted sooner than Sutton does. So I'd rather wait out Sutton, but I'll have Adams ranked ahead of Sutton.
Okay. Any other winners for you, Joe?
Look, you're a winner even if you just go back to the same spot and T. Higgins to the Bengals, because I think Joe Burrow is lined up to have an MVP caliber season this year. You have both of those weapons at your disposal. And Chase is, it's kind of similar in some ways too. If Chase should miss any time, you know what T. Higgins can be in this offense, and he's still not going to come with the same draft capital. So if you are somebody that wants to take a running back in that first round, you still have that availability. Look at guys like T. Higgins, guys like Davante Adams. When you're going back to the same offense, same situation, at least for now, we all think that this is locked in. We haven't seen any trades yet of T. Higgins. And then another one is Brock Bowers, I think, is a winner here. And I know he's not a free agent, but I think he's a winner because you can say whatever you want about Geno Smith, and there's shortcomings with Geno Smith. He's still a significant, and I'm going to use the word significant, upgrade over everything else that they've had there in the last couple years at quarterback. So forget Gardner Minshew, forget Aiden O'Connell here. You're bringing in a quarterback that has been to playoff games now. You're putting him in a situation with a head coach where he had the most success that he's ever had. I think that's a good situation. So for me, Brock Bowers is a big winner because I do imagine they're not done here in the draft. They're going to get some more offensive pieces. So even though I'm not looking for the Raiders to be a prolific offense in 2025, I think it's hard not to think that Brock Bowers is kind of a winner here in free agency, not because Geno Smith is great, but because Geno Smith is an improvement of what they have.
All right, we're going to take a quick break. Sorry, they'll get a quick break in here, and then I'll let Jamie and Dave respond. And I also want to know who Joe is going to have as his tight end one next season. Is it going to be Bowers or McBride? We'll come right back on Fantasy Football. Wait, hold on, before we play the commercial here. I was wrong about the URL for the bracket challenge. I do have a URL. It's a long, clunky one that we'll clean up later next week or this weekend or something like that. But in the episode description, I'm going to put a link to join our bracket challenge for 2025. Okay, play the commercial.
NCAA Men's Basketball Championship Selection Show on CBS and streaming on Paramount Plus.
I have a confession to make. I am not proud of this. We just played a video on YouTube. If you're listening on audio, then this doesn't, you have no idea what I'm talking about. But on YouTube, just played a promo with a Tom Petty song. I have never heard that song, and it sounds great.
I was going to say, that is that the Tom Petty tune, I believe, right?
Yeah, it's called Deliver Me. I just Googled the lyrics. I don't know how I don't know this song.
We just have Debro in his closet, like just dropping rhymes. Those are kind of the shows that, he just drops a couple bars and we use that as background songs in some argument. You guys got Tom Petty, way bigger budget here. Yet you still can't get Adam Azer a background, damn it. What are we doing?
Oh man. All right. I'm gonna listen to this song after the show. What album?
You should watch some Gator basketball highlights while you're doing it too.
That's okay.
They're actually good. It's like the one thing that I can tell people about college basketball this year is that the Florida Gators are good.
I'm just going to pick Duke, so I don't have to pick an SEC team. Joe, who's your tight end one?
Oh, it's Bowers still. And look, I love Trey McBride. It's not a knock on him so much as I think Bowers is the offense. Like, I think everything just kind of flows through him. And, I understand that touchdowns can be spotty year over year, and it was a terrible time for Trey McBride with touchdowns. But I continue to struggle with Kyler Murray. His body language is just awful to me. He feels like a guy that's really good at his job, but doesn't want to be there. And that's a very frustrating thing to me. And I think when you're a quarterback, I think that just rubs off. And this is not statistical analysis. This is going into just the eye test and the feeling you get from people. And having coached youth football now for the last 5 years of my life, I'm sure Jamie can attest to this too. You get kids sometimes that are really talented, but just don't love it. I feel like that's Kyler Murray. He's just a guy that's super talented and incredibly gifted athletically, but he doesn't have that other gear in him, that other leadership gear, that other gear that I think can take somebody like Trey McBride to an all-time great kind of level potentially in his career. I haven't seen that at Kyler Murray in the NFL, and I don't know if we're ever going to see it, and I'm getting really tired of it. So if I'm going to split hairs between greatness, I'm going to take the guy in Brock Bowers that just seems like the weapon that is so tough to stop defensively that I do believe is indeed the focal point of his offense. And as much as I love Trey McBride, I think Brock Bowers is the guy I'm going to go to, even though Geno Smith physically might not be the same gifted quarterback in some ways that Kyler Murray is. But although at this point, I don't know, Kyler Murray, maybe I'm just sour on him, boys. I don't know. What do you think?
You would think that, knowing what you do, you'd love Kyler Murray, baseball guy, football guy. Like, I mean, he fits both of your job descriptions. But yeah, no, he definitely has. I thought, from the stories we heard last year that we were going to see that from Kyler, that he had dedicated himself in the offseason coming off the ACL tear, the full year removed, that it seemed as if his trajectory was pointed in the right direction and that it was going to be a good influence on the offense. And then as, any athlete, things start to go a little bit south. And you said it, his body language is so evident. Anytime there's a problem, he's pointing fingers, he's pouting. It's just not what you want a leader to be. So, when you start to split hairs on two great players, when you're looking at Bowers and McBride, I can promise you from seeing it, we've all seen it, Pete Carroll's not going to let anybody in that sideline get down on themselves, so it'll be an interesting situation to see how Geno Smith and Chip Kelly, how much they influence that offense there in Las Vegas.
And we can talk about body language all you want with Kyler Murray. He still gave Trey McBride 9.2 targets per game. That is a crazy elite number for anybody in the NFL, but certainly a tight end. That is huge. The number that's not elite, though, touchdowns. McBride had only 3 of those. I just checked this. In the last 5 years, the leaders in receiving touchdowns from Kyler Murray, it's a tie. Marvin Harrison last year, DeAndre Hopkins in 21, 8 touchdowns each. So that's where I'm a little bit worried about McBride, is whether or not he can ascend to 5 touchdowns, 6 touchdowns. But in a full PPR format, I love the opportunity that he has to get a ton of targets. Thing is, I think Bowers has the opportunity to get a ton of targets too. And I think he can score touchdowns a lot more frequently from Geno compared to Kyler Murray and what his track record has been throwing touchdowns to one specific guy. It looks like it's pretty rare for one guy to even have more than 6. So I'm good with Bowers over McBride, but they're kind of a 1A, 1B for me in PPR.
I have a hot take on Kyler Murray, Dave, especially interested in your opinion here. I was thinking about Cam Ward, and I feel like Kyler Murray is my favorite comp to Cam Ward. I sort of see their careers being similar. I don't think Cam Ward is going to be a superstar, but I do think he's going to be a good quarterback. And just in terms of like athleticism, style, I see Cam Ward being closest to Kyler Murray of any quarterback that's currently in the NFL.
Sure, because of the mobility and the size. I think that's what you're looking for. I'm not sure if Kyler has shown as much like tranquility in the pocket as we saw from Cam Ward last year at Miami, where he would just stand there and like there's chaos all around him and he doesn't care and he still throws a tight window touchdown, something like that. Stylistically, yeah, they're kind of the same. They're move around quarterbacks that can chuck it pretty long. Good athletic quarterbacks.
All right. So let's go on to some of the biggest losers. But before we do that, I do think we should just talk about the Evan Engram acquisition here. He goes 2 years to the Denver Broncos, $23 million, $16.5 million guaranteed. Last year, the difference in PPR and non-PPR was kind of staggering for Evan Engram. Look, it wasn't a good year for Engram, but he still managed to be tight end 14 per game in full PPR, tight end 16 per game in half PPR, and Engram was tight end 22 per game in non-PPR. That's because he had 1 touchdown in 9 games. But it was not a good year. His 17-game pace was 89 catches, 689 yards. That's awful. And 2 touchdowns on 121 targets. Jamie, I'm going to give you the first word. What do you think about Engram? Will he be a top 10 tight end for you with Denver?
He will, just exactly at 10. And I think, again, not to the same degree as like great marriage of Davante Adams going to the Rams, but it's a pretty good landing spot for a guy that went to a team with a quarterback that is prone to, throwing underneath. with a coach that has used his tight end in his history and a team that is lacking a second, proven target. I think, between Marvin Mims and Vele and, whatever else they add, there'll be somebody to complement Cortland Sutton, but he could easily be second on the team in targets. And so, if he stays healthy, that's a big part of his game right now, 30 years old. But once you get past, like tight end 6, 7, 8, it's kind of just a crapshoot anyway. And so just looking at what he has been, what he still could be, and where he landed, he'll be a good late round target if you're sort of in the greater late, tight end boat.
Joe, what do you think? Will Engram crack your top 10? I know you haven't, you've been in baseball mode. I know that you're going to do rankings next week, but I don't want to put you on the spot. But what do you think about it?
No, not on the spot. I'm still knee deep in football. Yesterday was just a big baseball day. But in terms of Evan Engram, it's about health for him. Last year, he did not have it. If he's healthy going into this season, I'm intrigued. I think he's still a tight end 1. Top 10, I think he's right there. To be honest with you, right now, I think he's tight end 11 in the consensus rankings on Fantasy Pros. I could see drafting him over Njoku, who's at 8, to tell you the truth. And it's more because of the style of offense and the style of play of the quarterback there. I think Bo Nix, the king of low ADOT, is going to be looking to get rid of the ball quickly. And that plays in very well to utilizing a tight end like Evan Engram. So to me, I think this is actually a good potential fit. It's one that I want to pay attention to in training camp. I always say, the preseason games don't mean anything except for the players where I mean everything for. And Engram, to me, would want to be the guys where I want to see it on the field. I want to see what that rapport is like. I want to see how they're using him in the offense. And if it looks good, then I'm more apt to buy in. But so far, like I said, the big thing for me with Evan Engram is the health at this point. If he, continues to struggle with that, then it doesn't matter at the end of the day. Last year, the health just absolutely killed any investments you made. But in 2025, as long as you see it, healthy Evan Engram on the field in training camp, you see it look good in preseason, I definitely buy him as a top 10 tight end for sure.
All right, Dave, Evan Engram goes from the number 4 tight end per game in 2023 to 14th per game in 2024 in full PPR. One of the numbers I noticed that was much different was his yak. 3.2 yards after the catch per reception is horrible, especially when you consider he had a 5.4 yard ADOT, which is really, really low. And one of the things I saw from my notes from 2024 going into the last season was that Evan Engram said he wanted to be used more downfield. He wanted to be used more in the red zone. And the Jaguars, Press Taylor, their offensive coordinator at the time, he was not so sure. And they didn't. They just kept using him underneath really short stuff, and he did nothing with those targets. I'd like to see a little bit of a role change. Like we've talked about low ADOT and all that. That's fine. It doesn't have to be this low. I'd like to see him be using the red zone a little bit more. But I think he can bounce back because that yak per catch was so bad. And I've said this before. That's a stat when you see a guy who is consistently better in yak, and then one year he's really bad. Hey, maybe he's just at the end of the rope like Travis Kelce, like I think. Or maybe it's just a fluke and it's going to bounce back. I see that stat bounce back a lot. So I think that would help. But what do you think? Does Evan Engram bounce back?
I think he does. The yak, by the way, in 2023 was 4.5, so it was better. That's not necessarily great. The year before that, 2022, obviously he's 2 years younger, certainly a little bit more spry, 6.4. So it's double what it was this past season.
Right.
And we know that he had a hamstring injury, and that's what hung him up toward the end of the year. I don't know if he could have come back from it or not. But I just love that he was a volume play for Jacksonville. And I think that's exactly what he's going to be for Denver. Last year, Cortland Sutton, number 1 on the Broncos in targets with 135. Javonte Williams was number 2 with 70. So there is a real possibility that Evan Engram is the number 2 target getter in Denver. And I don't know if his role is going to change that much. He's been a low ADOT guy for the past 3 seasons. He's supposed to be an after catch guy. Adam, you kind of just made it clear that he hasn't succeeded in that after catch role. But kind of like what we talked about with LA and Davante Adams going there, I trust the offense. I trust the play caller. I trust the play designer. And that's Sean Payton. And with this guy getting a chance to be the number 2 target getter, and we've seen him get double-digit PPR points per game on the regular, I'm kind of interested, kind of excited about him. I like him as a top 10 tight end. I don't want to get too excited where I'm reaching for him on draft day, but he and Tucker Kraft are probably going to be the 2 tight ends that I end up getting the most of if I whiff on the top 5 tight ends.
I agree with Dave too. I think that like he could be that number 2 guy. I think that's very clear of everything. That's the upside of what Engram is. And it's going to be fascinating to see what they add or don't add in the draft. coming up here for Denver. Do they, try to spend capital on wide receiver? But the other thing to not forget too is if there's anybody who can scheme properly for a tight end to be successful, I think we can all remember, there were years there with Sean Payton where he was able to make a start at Jimmy Graham. He knows how to get tight ends open in an offense. It's not like an offense that is bereft of understanding how to utilize a tight end. And it's just more of a, I think, knock on the roster that he inherited, that just wasn't enough there to make that happen in 2024.
All right. And I will say that Evan Engram, if there's one thing he's done consistently in his career, he is a target earner. He's played 7 seasons. He's been on pace for, I think he's played 8 seasons. 8 seasons. He's been on pace for 115 or more targets per 17 games in 6 of 8 seasons. That is very, very impressive.
He's a short area target getter with a quarterback who loves to throw short.
And you're going
to Joe mentioned this. The ADOT for Bo Nix was 7.3 last year. That was 26th among qualifiers.
I mean, it's what he did in college too, right, Dave? I mean, this is just who he is.
Absolutely.
And it was succcsuccessful. They got to the playoffs. They got all the way to Buffalo. I mean, why
go and start changing that and asking Bo Nix to suddenly throw, 9.5 yards downfield on average with what they have at receiver and now at tight end doesn't make any sense to me. So this offense will probably be the same, but now they can add the wrinkle of Engram and what he can do as a matchup problem. He's a wide receiver playing tight end. So it's actually a great fit for fantasy.
All right. Let's get to Joe's losers. Any losers? And I'll ask, is Courtland Sutton a loser? As Dave just said, last year was Davante Williams he was competing with.
I don't think Courtland Sutton's a loser necessarily here in free agency. I think the biggest loser right now is Steelers wide receivers because they don't have a quarterback. So, I mean, we could put the question mark around it and see what's going on. I mean, imagine we get the inevitable Russell Wilson returned and everybody plays nice because they have no choice now. I don't think it's going to be Aaron Rodgers. We'll see what happens. I think, Cooper Kupp, I think when you get released, he was seeking a trade. Nobody was biting. You get replaced by Davante Adams. Then you get released, a few days later. I think that kind of spells the end for you. I'm sure some people will be intrigued if he lands in a certain spot, but I think Cooper Kupp, unfortunately, all that volume of that window for a couple of years has taken its toll on him. And I'm going to put this out there too, guys. I don't know what you think about it. I kind of feel like CJ Stroud is a bit of a loser too, because what have they done to help that offensive line that already had problems again last year? And then they dealt their captain on the offensive line. I have a hard time wrapping my mind around that. So I'm a little concerned about CJ Stroud. I don't know what the rest of the guys think, but that to me is another loser so far. And, I think one that we're not thinking enough about necessarily because we get so caught up in all the fantasy weapons and we don't spend enough time sometimes just thinking about what the offensive lines and the protections look like. But, on the inverse of that, I do like what Chicago's starting to do too, starting to put some better pieces around Caleb Williams on that offensive line. And I'm fascinated to see what kind of draft they have.
It's a great point about CJ Stroud, Jamie, because that line was a huge problem. They dealt Laramie Tunsil to Washington. They also dealt left guard Kenyon Green to Philadelphia for CJ Gardner-Johnson. So that's a good call. Does it extend? They did add Christian Kirk, which is nice, but losing 2 offensive linemen, I love that guy. I hadn't thought about that. Does it affect Nico Collins at all in your rankings?
Not so much Nico, and Joe's right. It hasn't been a great offseason, when you lose Stephon Diggs as of now, but even if he does resign, he could still miss the start of the season because of the ACL tear. We know Tank Dell may miss the entire season, just coming off the knee injury that he sustained. And yes, Christian Kirk's a nice piece. The one thing that I think can be somewhat of a saving grace for CJ Stroud, which is a big hope, is that his offensive line was a disaster as a rookie, and he was able to overcome it. Now, you don't want to say, okay, well, he did it once. Why can't he go do it again? Because he had better protection, at least on paper last year, and it didn't pan out. And so, you take away Tunsil, that's huge. You take away Green, that's not great. So they still have the draft to address it, and they tried to acquire, obviously, a lot of draft capital, not necessarily so much for this year because they got 4 picks for Tunsil. 2 of them are in 2026. So we'll see exactly what they do to upgrade the offensive line in the next, version of fix your team. But yes, for right now, it hasn't been the ideal offseason for a guy that was one of the biggest busts last year. Guy that was drafted as borderline top 5 quarterback and certainly did not finish in the top 12. So hasn't been great for him.
Does anybody think that Chuba Hubbard is a loser with the Rico Dowdle signing?
Yes.
Yeah?
Yeah.
All right, discuss.
I mean, this was a guy that was amazing last year, and, in doing at least my initial rankings, he was a borderline top 12 running back, and now you go and you add one of the better free agent running backs out there. Not a superstar, but, a guy that had a pretty solid season for a Cowboys team that was, disastrous when he was having his best success. So we're right back to kind of where we were a year ago with, okay, Hubbard and somebody else. Jonathan Brooks, okay, when he comes back, what is he going to be? How much is he going to take away from what Hubbard was doing? Well, now we have that. We have that with a guy that, hopefully is hungry to prove himself. I don't really love the signing for him, clearly, because, he had an opportunity to maybe go compete for a starting job. And who knows, maybe he beats out Chuba Hubbard, but the contract that they gave Hubbard last year doesn't suggest that at all. So it feels as if we go from, featured back to committee. And I don't know if Hubbard's that good of a player to have to deal with, losing playing time and losing touches. So he's still going to be a number 2 running back, but more on the back end as opposed to a top end guy, and a borderline number 1 guy for me.
It was such a, what was it? 1 million, 1 year, 3 million. It was like the
Right.
same.
There's some incentives in there too, but it's virtually the same deal that Dallas gave Javonte Williams.
Right. So does that tell you anything? Does it mean that Dowdle's just a backup? Like they released Miles Sanders and they signed Rico Dowdle. Do you think he has a bigger role than what the very ineffective Miles Sanders had last year, Dave?
No, a bigger role than what everybody is going to have a bigger role than what Miles Sanders had last year. So yes, he will have a bigger role than that. I think it's a brilliant signing by Carolina because it's a buyer's market at running back, and getting a good runner this cheap when they really shouldn't draft another runner. I'm sure they're hoping that Jonathan Brooks is ready to go by 2026, not 2025. So this is their 1B running back. I think they trust Chuba and will trust Chuba more in high value touch situations. So near the goal line, passing downs. Remember, Rico Dowdle didn't play that much on third downs last year. They were using their fullback to play on third downs, on passing downs for pass protection reasons. So I think Dowdle's going to be there to get around 10 carries a game or something like that. It's almost like you could say that Rico could be this year's Chuba. Last year, when we were looking at Panthers running backs in the draft, everybody was taking Jonathan Brooks first. And then a couple of smart guys were saying Chuba Hubbard in round 10 should be a really good pick. Could be the same thing here. I'm still obviously going to rank Chuba higher. I think Chuba's still a top 20 fantasy running back as of now, but no, not a top 12 guy, knowing that Rico Dowdle is going to be there to take some work away from him. I just don't think it'll be work that is going to cost Chuba Hubbard a bunch of touchdowns or a bunch of catches or anything like that. I think Chuba's still going to be their guy.
I'm going to get Joe's take on it. Sorry, Joe, I got to cut you off. I didn't need to get a break in here. We'll take a quick break, come back and hear from Joe on the Panthers running backs.
Dive into the biggest moments from the big dance with NCAA March Madness Bracket Breakdown, Sunday on CBS Sports Network.
All right, everybody, welcome back to Fantasy Football Today. We're here with Joe Pisapia of Fantasy Pros, and I'm just going to get our draft results from a draft we did in February. Chuba Hubbard went in round 4 to a guy named Joe, not you, but different Joe. He went ahead of Alvin Kamara and ahead of Tony Pollard. This is kind of almost a dead zone at running back. Chuba, Joe, it was Joe Mixon and then 6 picks, then Chuba Hubbard, Alvin Kamara, but mostly wide receivers in this range. Do you think Chuba Hubbard deserves to be a top 48 pick at this point, Joe?
That's a struggle because I do think Dowdle will get enough that will take a little bit of the shine off Chuba. I will say it might also be the thing that keeps him healthy. So I think maybe long-term it's good, but in terms of that weekly upside, it's going to cap it, I think, to a certain degree. I am, however, not nearly as fait accompli about the return of Jonathan Brooks as Dave is. You don't get a lot of guys who have 2 ACL tears and come back and play football. I mean, it's just not something you have at the running back position. I want to say Thomas Davis was one of them, but it's not something you get where you have the same player tear the same ACL twice. It's one thing to do the left and the right, that we've kind of seen before, that happens sometimes, but to have it twice in the same guy, I don't think we see Jonathan Brooks in the NFL, and I that's very sad. He was a very talented player in college, but I'm not expecting that, and I think the Panthers aren't either, which is why you're kind of getting these signings. We're saying, all right, look, even though it's a really good running back class, as Dave pointed out, let's take the discount on Rico Dowdle. It's a smart move there. I think when you have a quarterback the size of Bryce Young, you want to run the football. You need to run the football. You want to take that pressure off of him. And I think that is important as well. So is he a top 48 player? That I'm going to have to get back to you on right now. But he's a running back that I think is a low-end RB2. I think you still feel pretty good about, because I do think Chuba showed you he could handle the load. He could handle all of that. I know the end of the season kind of didn't go the way we wanted to, but at the same time, Rico is, I think, one of the more intriguing handcuffs because some of those deeper metrics do show you that he is capable. And I think it might be a better question to ask, is it better to draft Chuba Hubbard where he's going to go, or is it better to draft Rico Dowdle late and just kind of hedge with him on your bench and see what happens?
It is funny based on the money. Like, why didn't Dallas just give that contract to Rico?
Because Dallas doesn't seem to give money to anybody, do they, Jamie? I mean, have we seen like the
a little too much
here?
stack?
A little too much to Dak.
Well, they obviously,
unless you're a star, that's it, right? You have to be a star in Dallas, otherwise you just don't matter. And unfortunately, it shows every year, right? When the stars don't perform, what's left and not enough depth to compete at the NFL level.
well, we don't know what the scenario was. Maybe Chuba had, maybe Dowdle had a higher asking price, and then as free agency went on, he realized he couldn't get that anywhere, and he settled for what he got. But he got the same, more or less the same exact contract that Javonte Williams got. So it is interesting if the Cowboys knew that they were going to cost the same, and in that case, they obviously chose Javonte over Rico Dowdle. I don't think Rico Dowdle was a special running back. I don't know that.
I think the Cowboys look at the draft class too. I'm sure the guys will agree that it's a really strong running back draft class. You got the Hamptons, you got the Caleb Johns, you got all these guys like that. You could find another running back here. Get that rookie contract. I think that's important too, because as JB pointed out, you're paying Dak, you're paying some of these guys. The rookie contracts are a little bit more helpful sometimes in that scenario too. So I think they just look at the rookie class and there's probably enough value there in the second round for them that they feel good about the quarterback situation. That would be my guess. The running back situation.
I will say just to counter Joe's point about Jonathan Brooks, signing him to 1-year deal is hopefully a good sign that Brooks by 2026 can be. Right. It's still, I agree with you, still a stretch for him to come back and be anything close to what he was, but it's not like they invested in somebody else to be there with Chuba for a long term. So drafting somebody would have been a nightmare. Getting a 27-year-old free agent running back was an undrafted rookie free agent. So a guy that profiles more as a backup. Is certainly a better sign for Brooks' long-term future than it is for if they had just said, okay, he's done, forget it. We're going to go just invest in another player at that position in the draft. Okay.
So is there anything else that we should talk about, guys? So we're talking about, Mike Williams back to the Chargers, even Josh Palmer. Could Josh Palmer, as it stands right now, be the number one wide receiver? I'm sorry. So he went to Buffalo. I don't know why I had him in New England for some reason.
I thought you were about to say, could he be the number one wide receiver in Buffalo?
Well, as a Patriot fan, I can tell you, we don't have a number one wide receiver. So I'll clean that up for you.
Went to New England. I got confused there. I was going to talk about Quentin Johnston and maybe a bigger chance for him, but then they signed Mike Williams, De'Ami Brown of the Jaguars. Man, I'm grasping for straws here. But Dave, is there anything that stands out to you that's fantasy relevant with these?
No, I don't know if you've named anybody that's going to be big on the radar for fantasy managers. I had a minute today in the car thinking about Valdes-Scantling reuniting with Clint Kubiak in Seattle. I remember how MVS ended last year in New Orleans. And if Seattle were to continue to stockpile fast receivers that take the top off of defense and just forces the safeties to play back, wouldn't that theoretically help JSN continue to get open for those shorter underneath throws and continue to rack up targets and be just an absolute PPR monster? In theory, in my mind, that sounds really great. I don't know if that's how it's going to end up in Seattle, and I don't know how much we should really be thinking about Seattle's offense now with all the changes that they've made anyway. But that was one name that I don't think you mentioned that was interesting to me. The quarterbacks are interesting to me. Thinking about that Steelers run game and what that looks like right now.
Yeah.
They added Kenny Gainwell, and Jaylen Warren is on the restricted tender. So he's effectively in a contract here. If things kind of stay the way they are, and I would guess that they will, Jaylen Warren is finally getting to the point that we were hoping for to be the lead Steelers running back. And which quarterback, which veteran, old QB that's out there would be better for him between Russ and Rodgers? I went and I checked this. Both of them have thrown effectively at least 20% of their targets to running backs over the past 4 years, including Russ last year was at 24.5 to running backs in Pittsburgh. So either of those veteran quarterbacks, I think, would be good for the targets for both Warren and Gainwell, but Warren stands out to me as somebody who could be a winner in all this. Remember, the Steelers traded a second-round pick to get DK Metcalf. So that's one less pick they have to go and get one of these rookie running backs. I'm real curious what the Steelers' run game is going to look like. And if they don't make changes to it, Warren's our guy. He might be a top 24 running back in full PPR.
He is right now for me.
Yeah.
I could definitely see that. I feel like the Steelers are, remember when Billy Madison goes back to high school and he pulls up there in the Trans Am, he's got the denim jacket, right? He's like, hey, I was so cool. Remember how cool I was? And then he realizes what era it is in the NFL now. Same thing. Like now you're in high school and you're not cool anymore. I feel like that's the Pittsburgh Steelers. They seem very rudderless and directionless, and they really screwed the pooch last year. They had a 25-year-old quarterback who they could look at as we could take this year, give him an entire season in the offense, see if he could be a franchise quarterback. They gave him 6 games. He was 4-2, nearly 5-1. He almost pulled that game in Indianapolis out of his hat. And they replaced him with a 10 years older veteran in Russell Wilson, faded at the end of the season. And then basically are now sitting around still not having a quarterback. And if you don't have a quarterback, you don't have a chance in the NFL. And I don't know what they're doing. And this system that they're trying to continue to live in, like, oh, remember when we were cool when we wore our REO Speedwagon jacket? Like, that is not where you're at right now. It's 2025, and they feel like a team and an organization that's just behind in the thought process, guys, to me.
Your team should go get George Pickens.
You know what? I don't hate it. I don't hate it at all. Matthew Golden's the guy that I love in this draft class, but I loved him from September on. And then I told Derek Brown, I was like, hey, when you go to the combine, remember, watch Matthew Golden. I think that's the dude. I love how good he is in the red zone area too. But if again, so you bring in DK Metcalf, you trade that capital, why not just the one thing the Steelers have been good at, Jamie, has been drafting wide receivers.
Yeah.
Why don't you keep that draft capital, keep a rookie contract, trade Pickens, draft another wide receiver, and figure out your quarterback situation? I don't know, man. They seem lost to me, and the 49ers seem like a team that's on the precipice too. That, my God, I feel like they're hanging on by a thread. It's all good hopes and wishes that everything works out well, that everybody's healthy. But my God, like, I feel like we are on the edge of the cliff with that team too.
Oh, that's an interesting one. So the 49ers have had a really bad week. They have lost so many players, offensive line, defensive line. They lost arguably their best cornerback. It's not great. And then you got Ayuk coming off an injury. You have no more Deebo Samuel. But I remember how I felt. I remember talking about the Ravens last year. The Ravens lost 3 offensive linemen. The Ravens lost a lot of players on defense, as I recall, last year. There were some question marks. But as long as they have Lamar Jackson, they're amazing. And their offensive line pulled it together also. And I think that's kind of like the difference for me between the 49ers and the Steelers. The Steelers got to give a lot of credit. Like, Tomlin's obviously amazing, and they can always stay relevant. They can always stay in the playoff hunt. The 49ers, though, just seem to maximize the talent of like everybody on offense. So I could see them having like a really disappointing year, even though they just had one. But I believe in them. I feel like as long as Purdy's healthy, like, they'll be able to figure it out. But yeah, it's been a bad week for the 49ers. I don't know that there's a team that's lost more than the Niners. Nothing comes to mind.
No, but they've been gutted. I mean, it's and good locker room guys too. I mean, you lose Juszczyk, it's a big part of their culture. If you buy into that stuff, but I do think defensively, bringing Salah back is going to be big for them, just because they kind of stabilize what they want to do on that side of the ball. Shanahan will still get, I think, the offense in the right direction. But, I mean, look, it's Jimmy's and Joe's. It's not always X's and O's, and so they got beat up very badly last year. McCaffrey, Trent Williams, Ayuk, they lost a lot of key pieces. Pearsall, their first-round pick, not playing until week 7. So they're asking a lot of older players, Trent Williams to stay healthy and still be one of the best at what he does. McCaffrey to stay healthy and be one of the best at what he does. Those 2 guys didn't do it last year. We'll see. So when you have to pay your quarterback, this is what happens. And they have, the time has come. It's time to pay Brock Purdy. So hopefully he's their answer. You remember the storyline, though, speaking of free agency, they want, did Kyle Shanahan want Mac Jones? And did the front office want Trey Lance?
Right.
The front office won, and they got Trey Lance, and now they get Mac Jones.
Yeah.
Just some other notes here. Ty Johnson going back to the Bills. He's their third down back. And so that, if you were hoping that James Cook would have more of a third down role, probably not going to happen. He only had 4 catches last year, James Cook, on third down. Khalil Herbert to the Colts. That could be an interesting handcuff there. And that's about it.
Speaking of the Colts, what did you guys think about the Daniel Jones situation there? Because I was just talking about this before he signed on one of our shows where I said they're going to bring somebody else to challenge Richardson, but I feel like Richardson's in a vicious cycle where I wish NFL Europe still existed. Like he could go get a ton of reps somewhere and just, play spring football basically, and then come in ready. Cause I feel like he's a guy that just needs to play more. But he's never going to get that scenario. I feel like there's a lot of pressure on Shane Steichen, and I feel like if Richardson doesn't perform to their expectations and make some sort of big leap year over year or show him in training camp, that you might see Richardson on the outside looking in at Daniel Jones. You guys think that might be the case too?
It definitely could be the case, going to get a guy like Daniel Jones, they don't have to change their offense, so if they had brought in, more of a pocket passer, then it's like, okay, whoever wins the job, they may have to do some, adjusting on the fly. I think though, as a head coach yourself, Joe, you don't want to bench your daughter, but you bring in a quarterback maybe to compete with her, and maybe Richardson gets some reps that way, in the 12U flag football.
That's a tough night at home, boy. When you bench your kid, you're like, hey, look, you got to take the ball out of your hands. But no, it's a good point. It's a good point that they are, Daniel Jones. I think people forget sometimes, like, yeah, he's a really mobile guy out there on the field.
I would have liked Daniel Jones personally to stay in Minnesota just to see what J.J. McCarthy has or doesn't have. And then, does he have the Sam Darnold-like resurgence of being with Kevin O'Connell and maybe showing something there, at least to give them a veteran. Our esteemed producer is still hung up on Aaron Rodgers, which I don't understand.
He didn't throw a single pass for Minnesota, though. Like, there's a difference, right? What?
So what?
So what? I mean, it matters. I'm telling you right now, I'm very high on Anthony Richardson. I'm very high on him. He just needs to be semi-competent at quarterback, and he's going to be awesome for fantasy. And just like I said 2 days ago, man, watching the tape, that offense creates a lot of opportunities. I mean, I just couldn't even believe it. I think, and also just having to account for Anthony Richardson, there are guys wide open. He just has to hit them. And I think looking at the last 5 games after his benching, I think he played well enough, and I'm very high on him. He obviously
I do like that he's spending the offseason with Josh Allen, and Josh Allen's throwing guru.
Yeah, exactly.
So hopefully that translates to 58-60% completion percentage. And if he does that, watch out as a fantasy quarterback.
By the way, Josh Downs averaged 10.7 fantasy points per game in PPR with Anthony Richardson and 15.4 per game with Joe Flacco. So I hope Richardson wins the job because he's so fun for fantasy. I don't know that he's going to be very good for any of his receivers. He just barely throws. He runs for touchdowns.
He makes Alec Pierce a great best ball and DFS play.
Yeah. Alec Pierce led the team in receiving last year. Wow. By the way, I think I have another trivia. I have another trivia question. What song was Billy Madison playing when he pulled up to high school?
Stroke.
Yeah.
Billy Squire.
Yeah, there you go. All right. Hey, you finally got one. I had to give you a layup, Joe.
Hey, I got the other one. I got Evan Engram. I answered right. I got one of the 2 tight ends.
Jeez, I gave you like 6 hints for that one.
Well, I was right on it. I answered quickly on the Engram one. I felt like
my
than these 2 guys.
Yeah. All right. Good job in Stroke. Yeah. All right, let me read some.
Joe, did you enjoy Juan Soto hitting a home run right at the guy that was taunting him?
Oh, it was such a good clip, man. It's so good. My favorite part of that is the turnaround stare that he gave the guy first, where he's just looking. I was like, have you seen Juan Soto, man? I don't think that's a guy you want to get into like some sort of altercation with. I'm just saying, like, there's some guys, some baseball players, little fake tough guys. I don't think Juan Soto's a fake tough guy. I don't get that feeling from him at all. But it was a beautiful moment. Look. As a Mets fan, I know it's always going to end poorly. I taught myself last year to just enjoy the moment, and I enjoyed a lot of moments in the fall. It was a good time. I got a question for all 3 of you. Would you rather be investing in one of these 3 rookie quarterbacks, or would you want to go out there with a Russell Wilson and Aaron Rodgers or a Kirk Cousins in 2025?
Which team?
Any of the 3 needy teams left. Because what do you have? You got Cleveland, you got Tennessee, you got Pittsburgh.
Giants.
I mean,
Giants.
Giants too, 4 of them. Okay.
My answer is I'd rather have Cam Ward followed by all of the veterans. I don't know about Cousins, but I'd go Cam Ward, Russell Wilson, Aaron Rodgers, Sanders, and then maybe who is the other? Oh, Cousins.
Yeah, they got 3 veterans out there, and then you got the 3 rookies, basically. So it's
You're
like
putting Dart
somebody's.
as the third rookie.
I think I am. I mean, my comp to him. Again, this is probably more for the folks who enjoy the REO Speedwagon reference earlier. My comp for him was Jeff Garcia. That is who Jackson Dart reminds me of. A guy who is much quicker than you realize, not afraid of contact when he's out and running. If you watch the tape on the 2 of them, and I went back and I did some more of this too, the way that Jackson Dart really kind of puts everything into every throw, and you see him kind of on that front foot so much. To me, there was so much like Jeff Garcia in there. And Jeff Garcia was a guy that kind of snuck up on a lot of people, but had a lot of success in the NFL and some good 49er teams in that post Steve Young era. If he can have a career like Jeff Garcia, like you can go win with that kind of quarterback, especially in this style of the NFL. I don't know what your comp is for Dart, but that's mine.
It's pretty good.
Yeah, I have a beef with that because Dave, you remember.
Oh yeah, Jeff Garcia doesn't hold the door open.
Jeff Garcia, man, Dave and I were walking into the convention center in 2020 for the Super Bowl, and Jeff Garcia had a great opportunity to hold the door for us. It was not one of those like going to have to wait 10 seconds for it. It was probably a 2 to 3 second holding of the door, and he didn't even consider it. He just
were you tough on him in the past on some shows? Were you taking some shots at him back
He
in
had
the
no idea
90s?
if I had been, he would have had no idea of the anonymity that I have. But he could have held the door. He could have held the door. And if Jackson Dart is really like that, then I wouldn't want Jackson Dart on my team either.
Well, I don't know about his door handling skills. I'm just looking at the quarterback profile, and to me, that's the guy that I think kind of comps the best. And another one too that just was not on people's radars. They didn't see Jeff Garcia coming, and that's a guy that had some pretty darn good seasons and won a lot of games in a good
System.
And Jamie, if I recall, wasn't I really especially horrible at holding doors for people? Like when we would go to lunch.
Oh, you're the worst.
Yeah, I've gotten a lot better, but I was really bad at that actually. But
yeah, I mean, holding doors, looking through doors, it's just one of your things.
Oh,
all right. Some emails real quick. This is from Scott. This was addressed to me. Scott said, Adam, baked burgers are legit. They're better tasting and less carcinogenic than grilled burgers. Thanks for turning me on to them. Scott, I don't bake my burgers anymore. They're horrible. I now have an air fryer and I do that. So you gotta move on. Baked burgers suck.
I've never air fried the burger. How's that work? Is that coming out all right?
I don't have a grill, but
okay.
Air frying is much better than the stove. And better than the oven too. Yeah, I've
never done that for burgers. I air fried eggplant the other day for the first time because I'm getting older now. You gotta watch your cholesterol, the other things. So I'm trying to get away from like the regular frying, which as an Italian, it's kind of hard to do. But the air fried eggplant was pretty good. So I'm curious about the burger now.
Yeah, no, I did it last night. I air fried burgers. It's very good. Air frying is amazing. This is a great comment here from Joey. Where is it? Joey, where are you? Where'd your comment go? Adam, it says Adam Azer is the anti-Hodor. Hodor! All right, this question's from Rob. 10-team Superflex PPR Dynasty League. And yes, you will probably hear this on the Dynasty Show as well. You can have a maximum of 4 quarterbacks on your roster. I currently have Lamar Jackson, Jaden Daniels, Jordan Love, and Matthew Stafford.
Nice.
Going into the rookie draft, I don't have a first-round pick. I'd like to acquire one or an early to mid-second-round pick. I believe Jordan Love is worth a first-round pick and a player, and Stafford is worth a second-round pick and a player. Am I missing something, or do I have unrealistic values in a 10-team Superflex Dynasty League?
I don't know if they're worth pick and player. They're certainly worth the picks that you've set out to acquire for them. Because 10-team leagues, there's going to be so much talent available. So if you get a first-round pick for Jordan Love, I would look to explore that option.
I'm thinking when you say player that you're talking about somebody that just like kind of kicked into the deal and not like a premier player or even like a good player. So if it's somebody like that on top of the draft pick, I'm good with it. And I think you've got it nailed.
I would agree that it's depending on the player you're also asking for, especially I think right now, you have so much uncertainty of the quarterback position, right? Because it's not a great quarterback class. I think anybody's looking at it right now. If you need quarterback help, you're either taking darts on some of these kids, or you're looking at some of these veterans like the Cousins and guys like that and Rodgers. I don't think you want that. I'd rather have Jordan Love for a first-round pick and move on. And by the way, I see Michael's comment in the chat. Air frying eggplant is fine. You just got to make sure you're using the right stuff. It's not soggy at all, actually. You do it with the buttermilk, and then you do it with the breadcrumbs, and then you put it in there with the spray olive oil, and you just flip it 10 minutes in, run another 10 minutes. Much better than you think. Very crispy, not soggy. The opposite of soggy.
And air frying it with buttermilk definitely sounds like someone who's trying to watch his cholesterol.
It's better than the eggs. It's lower in the saturated fats. I learned that this month.
Okay, all right. I stand corrected. This is Will in Rhode Island. I have an offer for my second-round pick, which is 2.8 in a 10-team Superflex Dynasty League for Isaiah Pacheco. I have Javonte Williams, Achane, and Mixon, but I'm on the fence because I feel like the Chiefs will bring someone in. So this is the 18th pick in a 10-team Superflex Dynasty League. Would you rather have the 18th pick or Isaiah Pacheco?
So
this guy's pretty good at running back with Achane and Mixon, at least for now. If the rest of the team is ready to compete now, maybe I make this deal just to have the depth. But if you're not competing, if you don't think you've got a shot to win it all, I keep the pick.
if Pacheco is back, this is a steal.
Well, of course.
So you got to take that gamble of, how confident are you in his health? And if you're talking about what the Chiefs plan to do, they may have already done it with just Elijah Mitchell. I mean, they have so many holes to fill on their offensive line and their defense. Wouldn't be surprising if they don't take a running back, especially given their history.
I would take the pick. I like Pacheco a lot. I love the kid too. He's a local guy here, Rutgers kid, about 20 minutes for me. Great kid, great competitor, but the word "if" that Jamie just attached to him, I feel like is always around there. Well, if he stays healthy, or if he comes back, or if. And with Andy Reid, I just feel like they're always looking for some amalgamation of running backs, and they're just willing to move guys in and out. And in fantasy, that's just crushing. And I don't see a lot of touchdown equity for Pacheco. That's the other thing too. It's like, if you're not getting the volume, well, at least give me the touchdowns. If you're iffy on both, I think I'd rather have the pick and see what I can turn it into.
Does it change your mind knowing that Pacheco's entering a contract here?
No, I wish it did. I wish it made me more interested, because theoretically what we see is, right, well, let's burn them and churn them, right? But I just don't know if I'm sold that that's the Chiefs' way of doing things necessarily. I think they're more apt to just kind of, it's more like looking for the next guy as opposed to looking to use him up. Does that make sense? Like,
yeah. Oh, definitely. All right. So there's two ways of looking at that. And which way do you think is more likely? Your way, which is get what you can out of him this year and then move on, or he's going to be motivated to have the best year of his life because he knows he can get paid after. Let's have Pacheco on the roster this year on our dynasty rosters to try and take advantage of that. And I think the telltale sign will be what they do at running back the rest of the offseason, because it would not be shocking at all to see Kansas City draft another running back, knowing that Pacheco could have a foot out the door after this year. If he's not an excellent running back this year, I don't see how they re-sign him at all.
See, and now, that's the interesting thing you talk about dynasty.
Wasted.
But like, if they don't about the dynasty, okay, where does Pacheco go next year?
Right. He won't go anywhere. It'll be over.
I think I'd rather have the pick and rather invest in the guy who's coming into Kansas City as opposed to the guy who's going out to Kansas City, and I don't know where he's going out the door.
18 in a Superflex league, you could find Bucky Irving.
Well, okay, lad.
100%.
Hold on. You could find Bucky Irving. You could also find Marshawn Lloyd, Blake Corum, Jalen Wright, Xavier Leggett, Adonai Mitchell, Malachi Corley, Jermaine Burton, Jalen.
Yeah, it's a game.
Yeah, but most of those guys we can't write off yet.
No, we can't write them off. But I'm
still happy to have those guys on my team.
Yeah, you can't write off Lloyd or any of those.
Nothing last year. Like Pacheco could have, could give you something this year.
This is a significantly better running back class though than last year.
Yeah, but you also could find Pacheco, who was, a third, fourth, fifth round pick, depending on how senior.
It is a better running back class for sure. It's a much worse quarterback class, and it's a much worse wide receiver class. So,
in the first 18 picks of a super flex league, even a 10-team league, the top three quarterbacks are going to be gone.
Agreed.
All right, so
maybe even four if somebody gets talked up enough. Like you and I all know that. We all know this. Somebody's going to get talked up too much. Somebody's going to end up entering some weird conversation they shouldn't, and then people are going to bite on them too.
But last year we had 6 quarterbacks in our dynasty league. 6 quarterbacks go in the first 17 picks, including 5 quarterbacks in the first 10 picks. So I don't know, but I would take Pacheco. I think it's a very close call. I think we all think it's fairly close. So
I think if you can get
I'd take
maybe
Pacheco.
Pacheco and a third, and you're giving up a second, maybe a fourth, something along those lines.
All right. Well, Joe, thank you for coming on.
Oh, but my pleasure, man. It's always great to hang out with you guys, talk a little football, fun chat going on here too. So I can't wait to see where the rest of the quarterback chips fall. I don't know where you guys think Rodgers is going, but I say podcast. I think that's where he lands. He lands doing a podcast at some point.
Yeah, I think that's definitely in his future. All right, folks, thank you so much. Joe Pisapia at Joe Pisapia 17 on. I'm still not going to call it X. I'm going to call it Twitter.
Good for you.
We will talk to you on Monday with another edition of Fantasy Football Today.